we are with the infamous Steve C at Speaker's Corner. I'm going to let him do a little quick introduction for those of you who don't know. We are still deciding whether he's Steve C in the comments or not. Only time will tell.
Oh, that's what you were talking about. There's a Steve C in the comments. Well, it's categorically not me. I mean, let's face it, Steve's a very common name, especially amongst my generation.
But he's funny just like you are.
Just like me. I wondered what you were going to say there.
So, Steve, if you want to give a quick introduction to yourself, who you are, what you believe, and if you are talking politics, anything you want about that.
So, I'm Steve, been coming to Speaker's Corner for a very long time, probably too long. Real advocate for free speech and the importance of free speech and the importance of protecting Speaker's Corner for free speech as well. And more recently, standing for election for Reform UK and standing in the constituency of Ealing Southall in West London.
Oh, awesome. Thank you very much, Steve. So you've said you've been here for a little while. Has this place informed your decision on running for Reform or running for candidacy?
No, not particularly. I've always been interested in politics and current affairs and that sort of domain of life. Been kind of thinking about whether to stand for some time and finally decided to take the plunge.
Awesome. And you said that was Southall, Ealing, correct?
Ealing Southall is the name of the constituency, which covers all of Southall, Hanwell, and there's been recent boundary changes, so it now also includes all of Northfields and much of West Ealing as well. It goes quite close to Ealing Broadway now.
Okay, interesting. So Ealing Broadway is a separate constituency?
That's Ealing Central and Acton, and the previous MP for there was Rupert Huck.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm not very political. I don't normally dive into politics, but I thought it's Steve C. We have to. So what are your primary thoughts, your primary focuses on your running?
Well, I suppose if I start kind of at a national position, I think the general population are pretty demotivated, demoralised by the state of the country and the state of our politicians. In terms of the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, and with our first past the post system, it basically swings between the two of them and has done for decades and decades. But both of those parties have kind of lost their roots. The Conservative Party really are no longer conservative. We've got the highest taxation since the Second World War. Government has got bigger. They've gone down the identity politics road. So much about this current Conservative government is not conservative at all. And then I would say on the Labour side, the Labour Party no longer stands for the normal working man and working woman. Again, they've gone even more so down the identity politics route. They don't stand and represent normal British working people. They're more the champagne socialists from Islington, from North London. They don't seem to be in touch with people at all, so they've left their roots. And frankly, it's the one thing that George Galloway said, the Conservatives and the Tories and the Labour Party, they're the different cheeks of the same arse, basically. There is so little difference between them in so many ways. So I think it's time for a new politics and a new party and people that haven't lived their lives in politics. So I've never stood for election before 2024. I've worked across different sectors for 30 years. And a lot of people in Reform are like that. We do have people that used to be Conservatives. We have a few that used to be Labour. But a big chunk of Reform members and supporters are new to politics. They've never stood for election before, and like me, they're fed up with where the country is. They're fed up with politics in Britain, and they want to make a good change.
Okay, thank you very much. So, once again, like I said, I'm a bit illiterate in regards to politics. So, Conservatism would be called right wing, and Labour would be called left wing. What would Reform be? Would that be something in the middle?
I personally think the whole lens of left versus right is a little bit outdated and not particularly relevant these days. I would say personally, and I would say the same for Reform, I have a mixture of views, a mixture of positions. Some that might be considered more traditionally on the left, some that might be considered on the right. Exactly, as the gentleman said, just common sense, middle of the road, pragmatic, sensible stuff. You look at something that's broken, we've got to fix it. No holy cows that, it's the NHS and we all worship the NHS, so we just mustn't touch it. The NHS is one example. It's completely broken. And I know British people like to worship it and have a huge amount of respect for the NHS, but it is broken. The outcomes, which surely should be the most important thing, are poorer than most countries' health services across Europe. Yet we worship it, and the politicians all scream, "We've got to put more money into it. We've got to put money into it." It's a sponge; it just soaks up money without becoming more efficient. 1 in 10 people of this country are currently sitting on waiting lists. You don't get that in France or Germany or any other European country. It's a unique problem we have here. So therefore, we've got to sort out the health service. I believe in deliver it free at the point of delivery. I think that is a principle that we should protect. But I don't give a damn who's delivering it, whether it's the NHS, whether it's a not-for-profit organisation, whether it's a commercial organisation. What I care about is it going to make me fit and healthy? Is it going to heal me and do it in an efficient way without wasting money?
That's a good point, but just to elaborate on that, typically when businesses or corporations take over a certain area, they typically try and reduce costs and try and do things as efficiently as possible to maximize profits rather than to health.
Efficiency is good. Everything we do.
No, for sure.
Whether it's manufacturing widgets or whether it's healing cancer patients, it should be done efficiently and effectively. And as I say, just this sacred cow of the NHS, it's clearly broken. I mean, particularly on cancer. I think our detection rates of cancer and solving cancer is not very, very good in the league tables across different nations. So we've really got to sort it out. There is too much bureaucracy. There is too much nonsense. But it's not a resource issue. We are pumping more money into healthcare now, proportionately, than we ever have. So not just absolute figures, but proportionally, a bigger percentage of our GDP currently goes into healthcare than it ever has before. So it is not a money issue.
So would you, because I personally believe that the reason that we're pumping more money into the NHS system is because there's leaks where people are taking money out of it through private firms, which you probably may not agree with, but it's fine. And the other major factor is that we have more issues nowadays in regards to health issues where the government allows us to eat all this junk and deteriorate our health, where we do need the NHS more than we used to.
There are a lot of issues of health, healthy living, lifestyles, diet, exercise, obesity. We're becoming as I know I can't talk, but we're becoming as obese as a nation as America. We're going in that direction, and that is an appalling factor in people's healthcare. So all of that is important, but treating ill health, we're not getting it right, and we need some serious review. Nurses are just leaving the health service. We're recruiting nurses from around the world, which frankly isn't very moral. Why should the Philippines invest and train their nurses only to lose their nurses to us? And Philippines is one country that we get huge numbers of nurses from. So we've got to be able to train, and we've limited the numbers that we train to be nurses and to doctors. It's been capped. So we're causing the problem ourselves. So we need to get rid of that cap for training nurses and doctors. Reform are going to take all frontline NHS staff and social care staff out of basic rate tax for 3 years.
Okay.
So they will stop paying 20% tax from the basic tax income. So that will be a huge benefit and will help this huge urgency we have of needing to retain staff in the health service.
Do you think that, obviously, once again, I'll cut this out if you don't want to touch on it, but COVID-19, do you reckon that was a factor in regards to nurses and doctors actually leaving the profession as they were being somewhat forced into signing documents and claiming certain deaths when they weren't happy with it?
Vaccine passports was an absolute outrage, completely against human rights, enforcing people to have vaccines, under the threat of losing their jobs. That was outrageous and should have never ever been done. So I'm sure, some, particularly in social care, I think staff lost their jobs during COVID. But apart from that, no, I don't think that's a particular has added to the staffing crisis in the NHS.
Okay. So you think it's purely a lack of training?
It's a lack of training, it's relying on agencies too much. And actually, yeah, so if there's any issue with people making commercial benefit and taking profit out of the NHS, it's agency nursing. So again, where trusts have to rely on paying, very high rates and commission to agencies because they need agency staff. And again, the NHS relies far too heavily on agency nurses and agency doctors as well.
A lot of these agency nurses and doctors typically go for the agency because they have better rates of pay. A simple way to solve this, from my perspective, would be to give the doctors, well, maybe not so much the doctors, but the nurses better pay in the positions that they already are within the NHS. Is that something feasible, or is that, because I did like the whole no tax for 3 years. I think that would be a major help for a lot of people, especially nowadays. But I think we also remember need to raise pay to match inflation and cost of living.
I mean, the government, the state has pay review bodies that look into these things properly, and I think if the pay review body is set up as a proper definitive organisation, then they should be listened to in terms of when pay awards are given. I mean, I have less patience for the doctors and their industrial action. They were asking for 32%. I think they're still asking for 32%.
That's a big percent.
Which again is ridiculous. And everyone knows the medical profession, in terms of doctors and consultants, is a very nicely paid industry.
Right.
So I don't have much sympathy for the doctors, to be frank.
But the nurses, you do.
More so, yes.
Yes, thank you. In regards to...
And actually, can I say, and even more so than the nurses, staff that work in social care, staff that work in care homes, because they are the low paid. That to me is by far the biggest issue, how social care staff are paid, whether it's domiciliary home care, whether it's care home staff. They are often close to the national minimum wage. That is a travesty. They are doing a jolly hard job, and they're not qualified nurses, but they're doing jobs that most people wouldn't want to do, and it's a very hard job, and they have to have huge commitment to do that job.
And compassion.
And compassion, absolutely. And the fact that they're on typically such low rates of pay, that to me is a bigger outrage. That's where out of the doctors, nurses, or care staff in care homes, I'm with the staff in the care homes.
Fantastic, thank you. I personally had this idea that reform was mainly aimed at British people, or typically ethnically white. Is that wrong, or have I just not listened to the right people?
I would say you've not listened to the right people. I would say that's completely wrong. We have members, we have parliamentary candidates who are not white, black, Asian, Sikh. I was with a couple of our Sikh candidates Friday night, 2 days ago. So, and actually we were talking about this subject because there are some aspects of the press or aspects of society that do say those sorts of things about us, but frankly they couldn't be further from the truth. We are not anti-immigrant. I am not anti-immigrant. I'm not anti-immigration. What I am anti is mass uncontrolled immigration. And I can tell you from being a candidate in Southall, where a very, very large non-English white population, they're as worried about that issue as I am. Because frankly, they or their parents or their grandparents went through the proper procedures to get visas, to get a passport. They, more than anyone else, get angry seeing these criminals coming here illegally, getting hotels, and eventually getting settlement. Why the hell should they get that when they and their families went through the proper procedures to get that? There is a deep unfairness there.
No, I understand that point, but just play devil's advocate. Would you not agree that the system in place at the moment is set up to enable that behaviour? Because the system is essentially you can't seek asylum unless you are in the country of where you want to seek asylum. So a lot of these people feel like they have to come here, and once they're here, they then go through the proper channels rather than being able to start the proper channels while they
we don't have proper channels because they're following a legal route and illegal route. So
yeah. So would you reckon there should be a reform on those channels?
Well, let's be frank. You often hear they're fleeing famine and war, yet we all know 80% of them are young men in their 20s, maybe in their 30s. Now, if people are fleeing famines or war zones, typically it's women and children. We saw that in Ukraine, the Ukraine conflict. It was the women, it was the children that came here. It is not the same. These are economic migrants. They are economic migrants breaking the law, not following the right process.
What is the right process? Sorry.
Well,
Because I thought I could be wrong. I thought it was they had to be in the country. So I think that if we set up a system where they can do this while they're not in the country, then we can weed out that 80% and bring in the 20%.
well, so I mean, there is no legal route for economic migrants, and why should there be? So the legal routes are spousal visas. So you fall in love and want to marry someone from another country. Student visas, high-skilled visas. They are the main three routes. So high-skilled visas are skills that this country has defined as in demand, in short supply and in demand. That we need to bring those specific skills from other countries, and there's a list of those skills area that they're published on the Gov UK website. They are the legal routes to come here. And then obviously we make exceptions, as we did for Hong Kong, for example, as we did for Ukraine. But I'm sorry, there is no legal route for an economic migrant to come here from Albania or from Bangladesh or from Pakistan. There is no legal route, and why should there be? If you're not a student, if you're not a spousal visa, and if you're not in a high skills area. And we know all those areas can be abused. We know spousal visas have been abused with scam marriages. We know whole colleges have been set up purely to facilitate people coming pretending that they're students. So, those routes have to be properly scrutinised and regulated and managed to make sure that people aren't abusing them. But they're the legal routes.
Okay. And there'd be the war, if they're coming from a war country.
Yeah,
Which route is that?
I don't know the precise details, but we know we did it with Hong Kong, for example.
Or Ukraine, like you mentioned.
Yeah. So when there's a war or something happening in a country, for example, China completely putting two fingers up at the legal agreements they had with Britain for the handover of Hong Kong, we offered a route to Britain for people from Hong Kong. Interestingly, I don't know how many came, and I've never heard. I suspect not as many as could have come there.
Okay, thank you very much. And in regards to community, for example, if we did have a community of Indians sticking together, is that good or bad in the eyes of reform? Does reform want everyone to assimilate, or is it allowing you to be yourself and have your own cultures?
I'm not sure whether reform does have an explicit black and white policy on that sort of area. But what I would say, and I think the upper echelons of reform would agree with me, that for any society to be successful, there's got to be respect and tolerance and acceptance of that nation's culture, and that integration generally is a good thing. And so, I think they're the kind of two sort of general statements, because people living only amongst themselves isn't healthy or isn't good for a healthy society. Which is why
you don't think that people living with shared values, shared goals, is healthy for a society?
Absolutely, that's what I meant. That's what I said. Or maybe I didn't say that.
Sorry.
No, absolutely. That is the crux of it. And immigration is successful when that happens. When you do have shared values and shared cultural goals. But I think you can also have different values. You can have different heritage. So two communities that I would cite that have done that are the Jewish community.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
And the Sikh community.
Somewhat, yeah. Not as strong as the Jewish community, but yeah.
Definitely. Well, So I'm told that in most synagogues, I'm not sure about absolutely every synagogue, because every Sabbath service, as part of the service, they play and sing the national anthem.
Really?
And pray for the protection of Britain. As
Wow,
I say,
really?
I'm sure there is
I'll
one
have-
synagogue somewhere that doesn't do that,
Yeah.
but I've been reliably informed by a Jew that that's hard. And to be honest, when I've seen gatherings of Jews in London, they invariably play the national anthem.
Mm.
So I would say, they as a different group, a different culture, they've still maintained the aspects of their separate culture. And as with Sikhs as well, all Sikhs I've met and read and listened to online or TV, etc., have a huge amount of respect for this country, and work hard and pay their tax, but they don't reject or leave behind their Sikh culture and their Sikh symbolism or festivals or cuisines or whatever it is. So you can keep that, and that's absolutely brilliant. I think that makes Britain a richer place. But as you say, there has to be a core sharing of some values and respect of Britain and Britain's values, which those two communities, I'd say, in the vast main, absolutely get there.
Awesome, thank you. Just a couple more questions. I know you've got a few more people to talk to. So, in regards to this whole new thing of 15-minute cities, where does reform stand on this?
Oh, against them.
Against them, fantastic.
So, firstly, I would say they are part of, or what is part of that, is a clear direction, and certainly the Labour Party, the Conservatives, and the Lib Dems, and obviously the Greens have all gone down this road of anti-car measures. They seem, and I'll list a few of them. So many measures and policies that they're implementing that are nothing other than anti-car and frequently money generation. So things like LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods, things like ULEZ, things like very wide cycle lanes, narrowing road lanes, pinch points, floating bus stops, all manner of measure that, as I say, are both just anti-car and income generation, because the councils are skimming off money. I mean, ULEZ is an obvious example. It's just a tax on the poor, basically. But I was out yesterday with some Reform colleagues gathering signatures for other parliamentary candidates, and we were driving around Wood Green and Haringey and Tottenham. That area is covered by LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods, which basically means if you want to get from A to B, in the past you just drive straight from A to B and it would take you a couple of minutes, a little bit of petrol from the tank. Now you have to drive around the whole block, and when I say the whole block, I'm not just talking about one block, I'm talking about 6, 7, 8 blocks. And you're driving, I mean, we measured it. I mean, one occasion we had to drive 1.8 miles just to go a few yards. Wow. Because every parallel road had an LTN.
And an LTN, for those who don't know, is like a bollard in the road.
Low traffic neighbourhoods that are supposed to control where we're allowed to drive and where we're not. So loads of roads are blocked off by large bollards, or not even large bollards, just signs saying don't drive here. And then they've all got cameras, and you get massive fines if you drive through them. So you end up driving, a few yards as opposed to 1.8 miles. So you're using more petrol or diesel or electricity, which is generated by those things. You're using more rubber more wear and tear on the road. Yeah. It's crazy.
And the traffic that would have been filtered between 6, 7 different roads is now all being filtered down one road, which increases congestion.
Exactly. So again, you could say it's NIMBYism. It's saying I don't want traffic on my road, but I don't give a toss about those people that live in that road, who all this traffic is being redirected by. And they have the stupid idea that people will just stop driving. Well, we couldn't have done what we were doing yesterday without driving. Plumbers, window cleaners, electricians, home care assistants, they still have to drive. They're not going to not drive. So it's adding to pollution, it's adding to wear and tear, it's adding to people's frustrations, it's adding to congestion, because the few roads that you can drive down end up being congested. And sometimes they are roads with schools and doctors' surgeries on.
So you put more risk on the kids and stuff.
It's an ideologically driven anti-car nonsense that's being done on the back of net zero, which frankly is net stupid, by these silly, and it's not just left-wing. I mean, obviously Haringey is very Labour, but councils of all colours are doing it. But Reform stand completely against that.
That's good
So
to know.
in the London elections, we were going to scrap all of ULEZ, the central one and the outer one. Stop these. I mean, 20-mile-an-hour limits. If you're driving at 2 o'clock in the morning down like a main road, you've got to drive 20 miles an hour. Again, that's wear and tear on engines.
Yeah.
Engines are not designed to drive at 20 miles per hour. And it's increasing congestion.
Yes.
So there's no logic to what they even claim they're for.
And this, I'm from your area anyway, so from around Ealing.
Yeah.
So I know that outside Ealing Hospital is a 20 miles per hour zone.
Yeah.
Whereas if I go a few roads down and come out of that Ealing borough,
Yes.
I could do 30 down a residential
So
road.
you'll also know, just before you get to Ealing Hospital, you go over the bridge over the Brent by the near the Viaduct pub. They just put in, it was already a pinch point. So on either side, you've got at least one bus lane. So it was already a pinch point. They've just put in a cycle lane. So now the traffic lanes are so narrow. And again, you've got a typical empty cycle lane with traffic that's pushed together, squashed together. The traffic going through there in rush hour now is a lot worse than it used to be. They're doing the same in Brentford. They're narrowing the roads, creating pinch points, creating these bus islands, which are horrendous for people that use wheelchairs or mums with pushchairs and prams, or the visually impaired. So now they've got to worry that there's some idiot of a cyclist that's going to come hollowing down. They've done the same in Chiswick High Road. Chiswick High Road now is a car park with an empty cycle lane.
Really? It's been a while for me, but
It's utter madness. Utter madness.
so you guys are against all that as well. You're going to be trying to widen the roads, or what's your solution in reform?
So things like where they're within our control, things like ULEZs will go, things like LTNs will go. We will certainly stop creating extra pinch points and extra floating bus stops, and I hope we would get rid of them if we can. Certainly if it's within our control.
So you're trying to solve the issue by increasing the flow rather than restricting it, and then
how it used to be five years ago.
Awesome. And in regards to what's the other topics that you guys have on reform?
Tax.
Yes, tax. Thank you. Corporation tax, higher or lower?
Sound like Bruce Forsyth now. What was it? Play your cards right. Lower, of course, by raising thresholds. So our policy. So let's start on income tax, and then I'll move on to corporation tax. So income tax. The minimum threshold for income tax is currently about £12,500. So if you're on a salary of £13,000, which I think everyone anywhere in the country would agree, that's a low salary. You're taxed.
Only on the 1,000 above the 12.
But you're in the tax bracket, so tax starts. That is ridiculous. And this Conservative government haven't moved that minimum threshold for years and years and years. So it stayed the same, which means more and more people flip over it and start paying tax, including pensioners. The fact that someone on a state pension could theoretically pay tax. So we're going to raise the threshold from, as I say, about 12,500 to 20,000, which will remove at least 5 million from tax. 5 million people not on high salaries will stop paying tax. So that's in terms of income tax. In terms of corporation tax, do similar for that. So raise the minimum profit threshold for when a small business has to start paying corporation tax, move it to 100,000.
Okay, that's more for small businesses also.
Which
helping them to grow
help them grow and remove a lot, very one-man band, very small entities out of paying corporation tax, which again is very discouraging of people setting up their own businesses, etc. So again, removing a huge amount of people from paying that tax.
And in regards to actual corporations, is that increasing or decreasing the tax there? Or are you touching the threshold?
I'm not sure on that one, to be honest.
Okay, no worries.
But one important thing is, the fact that organisations can trade in this country, for example, Amazon, the fact that an Amazon can trade in this country and do millions and millions, if not billions of pounds worth of trade from this country and not pay a penny's tax in the corporate tax is an outrage.
Starbucks is another one, I believe.
Yeah. There's lots of them. There's lots of them that they set up their business group arrangements. So where they're charged corporation tax is either in a low tax or a tax-free zone. But if I'm afraid to say I'm an Amazon customer from time to time. So
guilty as charged.
If I sit in South or log on to Amazon and choose a grow bag or whatever, and my money goes to Amazon. Amazon take the money. They then obviously they've got a third party, the wholesaler, but then Amazon delivers it to my door. How dare they not pay tax like any other business would pay tax?
So a lot of arguments against this, like raising any tax for big businesses, corporations, or even trying to chase down Amazon or Starbucks, is typically the idea that, oh, if we raise the tax, they just won't be here and we won't have the. What do you think about that?
I mean, that's a very important point that you have to be very careful with, because often Labour supporters will say, "Oh, we've got to up corporation tax, we've got to up income tax because rich people need to pay more." Well, it doesn't necessarily mean if you increase a rate of tax that the money that you receive back proportionately increases. That's often not the case. I think there have been in history times where a tax has been put up and the overall take reduces. So, of course, you want to encourage entrepreneurs, you want to encourage business. And a big part of that is by making sure you haven't got unnecessary bureaucracy and red tape, which we were supposed to be achieving after Brexit, but that's never been done. So you have to make life easier for businesses by removing bureaucratic nonsense.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I've got one last question for you. This one's more of a personal suggestion. Obviously, you could just outright refuse it, or you could take it as consideration.
Yeah.
Personally, I believe that any MP should not get a salary from the government, as in, you know how like MPs.
They're on a salary.
Yeah, and then they also have the expenses and all this, and it gets abused and stuff like that. I think if it's a public service job, it should be done for the service of the public. It shouldn't be done
voluntarily.
Yes.
How would MPs live?
Through the kindness of the constituents. If the constituents think that they've done a really good job, they would get a nice little healthy bonus that month that would keep them going.
But through charitable, voluntary donations.
100%, because that's the only way we can hold these politicians accountable to their promises. That I personally see, but like I said, it's my personal opinion.
I mean, I don't think I would agree with that, but just to challenge you, that if you did that, wouldn't that result in only rich people becoming MPs?
That's a very good question. It may do, but essentially what would happen is, they would get outvoted as soon as they could.
But they could be in for 5 years. Because there is an argument, a polar opposite argument to what you just made, of increasing their salary, and I don't know whether you would have tied what I'm about to say in with your suggestion, make it illegal for them to work and get a salary from elsewhere.
Nice, okay.
Because there are MPs that have other jobs, but obviously, Jacob Rees-Mogg is an immediate example. He works for GB News. I'm sure he probably does lots of other things. He's probably executive director for businesses and stuff. But a huge amount of MPs do have other employment. Do. So there is a suggestion that you prevent that.
I would say an amalgamation of the two would be, so they don't get paid elsewhere, and they can't work elsewhere. They can't have another source of income.
So again, another challenge. What if they live in an area that's a poor area?
So then that will be more incentivized to make it a more affluent area.
But where's the money going to come from? If all of their constituents are poor, living on the breadline, they're not going to be able to afford to voluntarily give money to their MP.
No, it'd be sorry.
So those MPs will suffer more than, I don't know, an MP in Guildford or in the City of London, for example, where the locals might be very rich and might give them absolutely loads of money.
But you'd also have to agree that also living in these poor areas means that cost of living will be lower. So yeah, comparing it to London is good.
I'm not convinced by your argument.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It was just a suggestion. It's something I've been mulling over.
Yeah, no, I just.
Maybe one day.
One of, like I think I said right from the outset, one of our biggest challenges now, in my view, is the quality of our politicians.
I agree.
The quality of the members of parliament. We have an appalling quality now. And I'm sure, you're old enough to remember 10, 15, 20 years ago, whether we agreed with them politically or not, there were MPs that you had respect for, that they knew their stuff, they were knowledgeable, they were good orators. Whether they were left or right or wherever, they were good, sound, strong politicians. it's very difficult now to think of politicians that you describe in that way.
See, I could describe one, but I typically get shot down as soon as I mention his name. Jeremy Corbyn. Yeah, exactly. He's like Marmite to some people.
And another Marmite example would be Diane Abbott. I mean, I think
I'm more
you're not so sure now. But, I mean, the public perception of Diane Abbott is appalling because of some of her car crash interviews that she's done. Yeah, I'm told, and I mean, there's been protests only this week that she's very, very popular locally. And apparently, she does a very good job for her constituents.
Maybe it's just the media making her out to be worse than she is. Like you said, media does it for you guys.
But she has been useless. The car crash interviews which she's had where
I have no idea.
Where she was clueless on what she was being asked about. And she was in the shadow cabinet, and I think, that's when I think some of the worst interviews happened, where she didn't know some very, very basic details that she really, really should have, and came across as thick as mince, I think the expression is. So, but no, so we agree that the overall quality of our members of parliament now is not very impressive, and I'm not sure your suggestion would necessarily improve that quality. It wouldn't attract.
Firstly, I said there's only one way to tell. We've tried everything else.
Well, true. And then the phrase, if it's not broke, don't mend it, certainly is not applicable in this situation because it is broken. It is broken,
so broken,
and it needs mending. And another thing we haven't touched on is the whole system of democracy: first past the post.
Oh yes, you did mention that.
Postal voting, etc., etc. We've got a House of Lords. That's another one.
Yeah.
We've got to have a real.
I'm going to go away, do some more research into what Reform Party points are, and actually a bit more on the political system because I am a complete novice. I know nothing, Jon Snow. But yeah, I would like to come back and talk to you about those in more detail, if possible, in the future. But otherwise, thank you so much for your time, Steve. Any last words for the camera? Do you want to give you a little speech?
Vote Reform. 2 words.
Come on, I'm going to put music behind this. It's going to be
on the spectrum.
I know, we've already got that.
It's going to be orchestral music. This is like...
You want something dramatic,
yes,
do you? Oh, God. You want a dramatic... This country is broken. It's hard to think of anything in this country that you think, that's still really good. You could have 20 years ago. Where's the house service, policing, the civil service, the BBC? 20 years ago, they were organisations that were venerated, and quite rightly so. But now all of those, everything about this country is broken, which is really sad because this is a great country. But our current politicians just aren't up for the job. So if you keep voting for the clowns, it's the clowns that you get. So start giving someone else a chance. Stop voting Labour and Conservative. And actually, above voting for Reform, which obviously I want you to do, just stop voting Conservative, stop voting Labour, give someone else a try. Whether it's an independent, whether it's the SDP, I don't think I'm going to say whether it's George Galloway. I can't quite go that far. But certainly, as you're going to do, look into Reform, because so many people, when they discover what we stand for, they like us. So have a look at Reform and consider giving Reform your vote. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you again, Steve. Appreciate it.
I could be a politician.